In this video, I will be discussing some initial things about warfarin, which I will be assuming that everyone knows in the other videos. Now, initial statements about warfarin dosing. Firstly, warfarin is used as an anticoagulant, and the anticoagulation system is incredibly complicated and incredibly beautiful. But I won't be talking about it. Other videos have done an excellent job at explaining that beauty. I'm going to be taking a much more laid-back approach. Here we have a problem. It's what's known as black box approach. And I'll be sharing with you some of the details that a self-doser can know. Now, two basic measurements. There's the PT, the prothrombin time for anticoagulation, and the I/NR, the International Normalized Ratio. Now, basically, the INR is the standardized PT. Now, warfarin has a set of figures, and an INR of 1 is taken to be 0 anticoagulation. 2 INR of 2 is the minimum for clot prevention, whereas 5 is roughly the maximum safe level, and 8 INR is the maximum reading on a Coagucheck meter. Low INR basically leads to a greater danger of clots, blood clots, particularly in the brain or the heart, whereas a high INR leads to a greater danger of bleeds, especially in the brain, unstoppable bleeds. And so there's always the tension of clots versus bleeds. Now, for most people, a low INR is more dangerous than a high INR. And the other thing to note about the INR scale is there's very little safety margin in a low INR, whereas there's much more margin at the higher end. Now, there are different target ranges which are set for different problems. If you have atrial fibrillation, it will probably be an INR range of 2 to 3. Whereas if you have a mechanical heart valve, it is probably 2.5 to 3.5. Doctors sometimes set other target ranges. Now, for dosing, you have to treat the parts of the INR curve differently. You have to look at the initial end, where there's the problem of clots, the middle part, which is safety, and the higher end, where there's a greater bleeding risk. The other thing to note is that the higher INRs have more margin. There's very little difference between INR of 4 and INR of 5. And also, the higher INRs are much more sensitive to a dose change than the lower INRs.